The security camera caught every thinkering's smug face as she destroyed the garden, the careful way she avoided the freshly poured walkway, and the exact moment 3 days later when she decided to take a shortcut. What she didn't know was that beneath that innocent-looking concrete lay something that would change everything. Some traps are meant to catch more than just feet. Marcus Rivera had built his life around precision. 23 years as a civil engineer had taught him that every foundation mattered, every measurement counted, and every detail could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. His house on Maple Street reflected this philosophy: perfectly manicured lawn, geometrically precise flower beds, and a driveway so level you could use it as a surveyor's benchmark, which was exactly why Karen Hutchins drove him absolutely insane. Woman lived 3 houses down in a property that looked like a tornado had been using it for target practice. Overgrown weeds, peeling paint, and a collection of garden gnomes that seemed to multiply like rabbits after rain. Marcus had tried to be neighborly at first, even offering to help with basic maintenance, but Karen had made it clear that his uptight suburban perfectionism wasn't welcome. The war had started small. A few passive-aggressive comments about property values, some pointed looks during HOA meetings. But 3 months ago, things had escalated when Marcus filed a complaint about Karen's dogs using his prize-winning rose garden as their personal bathroom. "You want to play games?" Karen had hissed at him across the fence that's separating their yards. "I'll show you games." The first incident had been subtle. His morning newspaper mysteriously ended up in the storm drain. Then his trash cans started appearing in different positions each week, contents scattered across his driveway. When his wife Alina suggested they install security cameras, Marcus had resisted. "We're not living in a police state," he'd argued. "She's just being petty." But Alina, a family therapist with an intuitive read on human behavior, had insisted. "Trust me, Marcus, this woman isn't done." The cameras went up on a Tuesday. By Friday, Marcus understood exactly what his wife had meant. He was reviewing the footage over his morning coffee when he saw Karen, dressed in dark clothing at 2:47 a.m., systematically destroying 6 months of his garden work. She'd brought tools, a small shovel, pruning shears, and what looked like a bottle of herbicide. The woman moved with methodical precision, uprooting his heirloom tomatoes, shredding his prize-winning dahlias, and dousing his herb garden with enough chemicals to create a botanical wasteland. But it was her face that made Marcus's blood run cold. Even in the grainy night vision footage, he could see her expression: not anger, not frustration, but pure, calculating satisfaction. She knew exactly where the cameras were and had positioned herself to be clearly visible. This wasn't vandalism. This was a declaration of war. "Jesus Christ," Elena whispered, watching over his shoulder. "She wanted you to see this." Marcus's hands shook as he scrolled through the footage. 12 minutes of systematic destruction. Plants that had taken months to cultivate, destroyed in less time than it took to make a sandwich. The financial damage was maybe $300, but the psychological impact was devastating. This was his sanctuary, his proof that order could triumph over chaos. "We call the police," Alina said firmly. "This is criminal destruction of property." "With what evidence?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Look at this footage. She's wearing a hood, sunglasses at night, and she was careful not to show any identifying features except when she looked directly at the camera. Any halfway decent lawyer would argue it could be anyone." Alina studied the screen more carefully. "But we know it's her." Knowing and proving are different things. Marcus had dealt with enough legal disputes in his engineering career to understand the distinction. Besides, even if we could prove it, what's the punishment? A fine? Community service? She just escalates. "So what do you want to do?" Marcus stared at the frozen image of Karen's satisfied smile. 23 years of following rules, respecting systems, and believing in proper channels had gotten him here. Watching his neighbor destroy his property while knowing the system couldn't or wouldn't protect him. "I want to think about it." Next morning, Marcus walked through his devastated garden like a crime scene investigator. The damage was even worse in daylight. Karen hadn't just destroyed plants. She'd been strategic. Every specimen that couldn't be easily replaced was gone. The Japanese maple he'd nursed back to health after transplanting's dead, the climbing roses that had taken 3 years to establish their trellis pattern slaughtered, even his grandmother's peonies, grown from bulbs she'd brought from Italy 60 years ago, had been specifically targeted. It was then that Marcus noticed something else. Karen's footprints in the soft soil led directly to the back corner of his property, where they disappeared over the fence line. But there was another set of prints, smaller and deeper, leading from his side yard toward the street. She'd brought help. Dad. Marcus turned to find his 16-year-old daughter Sophia standing at the edge of the garden, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Sophia had inherited his precision and Elena's emotional intelligence, creating a teenager who was both methodical and fiercely protective of her family. "She did this, didn't she?" Sophia's voice carried the kind of cold fury that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of his own reaction. "That crazy woman from down the street." "We don't know for certain, Dad." Sophia's tone cut through his diplomatic response. "I saw her yesterday afternoon, standing at the fence and staring at the garden. She was taking pictures. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a fundamental recalibration of his worldview. Pictures with her phone. She was documenting where everything was planted. Sophia kicked at a destroyed tomato plant. This wasn't random vandalism. She planned this. The implications hit Marcus like a structural failure he should have seen coming. Karen hadn't just destroyed his garden. She'd studied it first, learned its layout, identified its most valuable components, and then executed a plan designed for maximum psychological damage. This wasn't the act of an angry neighbor. This was warfare. "What are you going to do?" Sophia asked. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the ruins of 6 months' work, then at the fence line where Karen's house was visible through the trees. In the distance, he could see her in her own yard, apparently working in her garden with theatrical enthusiasm. "I'm going to fix this," he said quietly. "How?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time in 24 hours, it felt genuine. "I'm an engineer, sweetheart. I solve problems." That afternoon, while Alina took Sophia to soccer practice, Marcus began his research. He started with the city planning office, pulling property records and zoning maps. Karen's house sat on a lot that had some interesting characteristics: steep grade in the back, an old septic system that hadn't been updated to city standards, and a driveway that technically encroached 3 inches onto city property, but it was the utility easement that caught his attention. A 6-foot-wide strip of land that ran along the back of both their properties, officially owned by the city but maintained by the property owners. The same easement where Karen had dumped lawn clippings for the past 2 years, despite repeated citations from code enforcement. Marcus spent the evening with his laptop, reviewing municipal codes, contractor databases, and his own professional network. By midnight, he had the framework of a plan that was both elegant and absolutely ruthless. The next morning, he called his concrete contractor. "Hey, Pete, it's Marcus Rivera. I need a small job done, but it has to be perfect, and I need it done this week." "Sure thing, Marcus. What are we talking about?" "I'm pouring a new walkway along my back property line. Nothing fancy, just a 4-foot-wide path where I'm allowed to build according to the easement rights. But here's the thing, I need the concrete to look completely normal on the surface, but I want a hollow space underneath, like a tunnel, but filled with something that won't show up until someone puts serious weight on it." Pete was quiet for a moment. "That's unusual. What's it for?" Marcus looked out his kitchen window at Karen's house, where she was visible in her yard, still playing the role of innocent gardener. "Let's call it a structural experiment," Marcus said. "I want to test how different materials behave under unexpected stress." 3 days later, the concrete truck arrived. Marcus had spent 72 hours perfecting the details, consulting with materials engineers and reviewing soil composition data. The walkway would look completely innocent, a simple concrete path along his property line, well within his legal rights to construct, but beneath the surface, hidden under 3 inches of perfectly normal concrete, lay a carefully engineered void filled with a mixture of sand, sawdust, and biodegradable foam. From above, it would support normal foot traffic without any problems. But if someone tried to drag something heavy across it, say, a wheelbarrow full of yard waste, the concrete would give way like a trapdoor, creating a perfectly person-sized hole. As Pete's crew finished the pour, Marcus noticed Karen watching. From her kitchen window, she was too far away to see the details, but close enough to register that her neighbor was making improvements to the exact area where she'd been dumping her yard waste. PART to the screaming had stopped, replaced by a string of profanity that would have made a construction crew blush. Marcus approached the pit at a measured pace, his phone already dialing 911 while his security cameras captured every moment from 3 different angles. 911. "What's your emergency?" "This is Marcus Rivera at 1247 Maple Street. My neighbor appears to have fallen into a hole on my property. She's conscious and verbal, but she's trapped and may need assistance getting out." Karen's head whipped toward his voice, her face, a mask of mud, leaves, and absolute fury. "You son of a bitch, you did this on purpose." Marcus activated his phone's speaker so the 911 operator could hear. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you mean. You were dumping yard waste on my property when the ground gave way. Are you injured?" "The ground didn't just give way, you psychopath. This is a trap." The 911 operator's voice crackled through the speaker. "Sir, is the person making threats?" "She seems upset," Marcus replied calmly. "Understandably so. Being trapped can be frightening." Karen tried to hoist herself out of the pit, but the concrete edges were too high, and her arms were covered in the same slippery mixture of mud and decomposing leaves that filled the bottom. Each attempt sent her sliding back down with a fresh cascade of debris. "Sir, we have units en route. Please stay on the line and keep the person calm." "I'll do my best," Marcus said, then addressed Karen directly. "Help is coming. Try not to move around too much. You might injure yourself." "Injure myself?" Karen's voice pitched higher. "You buried me alive. I built a walkway on my own property. You chose to trespass on it." Alina appeared at Marcus's shoulder, wrapped in a bathrobe and looking like she'd been awakened by the commotion. She took one look at the scene, and her expression shifted from confusion to something approaching awe. "Is that Karen Hutchins in our backyard?" she asked quietly. She was attempting to dump yard waste on our property when she fell through some unstable ground, Marcus replied, maintaining his neutral tone for the 911 operator's benefit. Alina studied the neat concrete edges of the pit, then looked at her husband with newfound respect. Unstable ground, right. The sound of sirens grew closer. Marcus could see Karen's expression changing as the reality of her situation became clear. She wasn't just trapped, she was trapped while committing a crime, on camera, with multiple witnesses. Marcus, she said, her voice suddenly taking on a pleading tone. We can work this out. I'll pay for your garden. I'll apologize. Just help me out of here before the police arrive. I'm not qualified to perform a rescue, Marcus replied. That's what emergency services are for. Please. Karen's desperation was palpable now. I have warrants. If they run my name? Ellie raised her eyebrows. Warrants? Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. What kind of warrants, Karen? Nothing serious. Just some old parking tickets and a missed court date for the noise complaints from the Hendersons. But they'll arrest me. The sirens were on their street now. Marcus could see the red and blue lights reflecting off his neighbors' windows as curious faces appeared at doors and behind curtains. The morning's entertainment was about to become a neighborhood spectacle. Sir, are you still there? The 911 operator's voice brought Marcus back to the phone. Yes, I'm here. The emergency vehicles are arriving now. We'll stay on the line until they take over. The first responders arrived in a convoy, fire truck, ambulance, and 2 police cars. Marcus watched Karen's face crumble as the reality hit her. What had started as another petty act of revenge had turned into a very public arrest. Fire Captain Rodriguez approached the pit with professional efficiency, his crew already unloading rescue equipment. Ma'am, are you injured? No, but I want to file a complaint against this man. Karen pointed an accusatory finger at Marcus. This is entrapment. He built a booby trap. Officer Chen, compact Asian woman with the bearing of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity, looked from Karen to Marcus to the scattered yard waste. Sir, can you explain what happened here? Marcus handed her his phone, which had been recording the entire encounter. I was having coffee when I heard screaming. When I came outside, I found Ms. Hutchins trapped in what appears to be a sinkhole that opened up when she was attempting to dump yard waste on my property. A sinkhole? Officer Chen repeated flatly. The ground can be unstable after heavy rain, Marcus said. I've been planning to have this area surveyed for drainage issues. Captain Rodriguez's team had rigged a harness system and was preparing to extract Karen from the pit. As they worked, Officer Chen reviewed the phone footage, her expression growing more interested with each passing minute. Ma'am, she called down to Karen. Can you explain why you were on Mr. Rivera's property at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning? I wasn't on his property. I was on the easement. Officer Chen consulted a tablet, apparently accessing property records. According to city maps, this location is clearly within the boundaries of 1247 Maple Street. You were trespassing? This is harassment? He's been harassing me for months. Do you have documentation of this harassment? Chen asked. Karen's mouth opened and closed without sound. Marcus almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Alina squeezed his arm. Sophia's awake. She whispered she wants to come watch. Absolutely not, Marcus replied. This is about to get much worse for Karen, and I don't want our daughter seeing someone's life fall apart, even if they brought it on themselves. As if summoned by his words, Karen's life began falling apart in real time. The fire department extracted her from the pit with professional efficiency, but the moment her feet touched solid ground, Officer Chen stepped forward with handcuffs. Karen Hutchins, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, illegal dumping, and destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent. ... Destruction of property. Karen shrieked. He's the one who destroyed property. Look at this hole. Officer Chun's partner, a tall black man named Officer Williams, was examining the pit with the thoroughness of someone who'd investigated actual booby traps. Sir, this appears to be a concrete walkway that collapsed under weight. Do you have permits for this construction? Marcus produced his phone again, this time showing the permits and inspection records he'd obtained before beginning the project. Everything was done to code. The concrete was poured by Peterson Construction, and they can verify the specifications. What specifications? Karen demanded. You can't just dig giant holes in your backyard. I didn't dig a hole, Marcus replied. Calmly, I poured a walkway. If it failed under the weight of your trespassing and illegal dumping, that's unfortunate, but it's not criminal. Officer Williams was now taking photos of everything: the pit, the scattered yard waste, the concrete edges, and the clear property lines. Sir, we'll need to have the city inspector verify that this construction was legitimate. But based on what I can see here, this appears to be a structural failure rather than an intentional trap. Marcus nodded gravely. I'll cooperate fully. With any investigation, I'm as concerned as anyone about what caused this collapse. Karen stared at him with undisguised hatred. You planned this? Every detail. You're not the victim. Here I am, ma'am, Officer Chen said firmly. You were caught on video trespassing on private property while attempting to dump yard waste. Whether this hole was intentional or not, we're committing crimes when you fell into it. As they loaded Karen into the patrol car, she made one final attempt at negotiation. Marcus, we can still work this out. Don't let them do this. Marcus walked over to the patrol car, close enough that only Karen could hear him. You burned down my garden, he said quietly. You declared war on my family. You brought tools and poison and deliberately destroyed months of my work because you thought I was too weak to fight back. Karen's face went pale. You can't prove that. Marcus smiled and held up his phone. I have security footage of everything, Karen. Your midnight gardening expedition. Your reconnaissance photos. Even you celebrating afterward. The police haven't seen that footage yet, but they will. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to understand something. Marcus leaned closer to the car window. I'm a civil engineer. I build things that last. Bridges, foundations, systems that can handle stress and pressure and still stand strong. You picked a fight with someone whose job is solving structural problems. Karen's eyes filled with tears, but Marcus felt no sympathy. She'd had dozens of opportunities to back down, to choose de-escalation over warfare. Instead, she'd destroyed something he'd built with love and patience. This trap you fell into? Marcus straightened up. This is just the foundation. Wait until you see what I've built on top of it. As the patrol car pulled away, Marcus found himself surrounded by neighbors who'd emerged to witness the spectacle. Mrs. Patterson from across the street, the young couple from next door, even old Mr. Jacoby who usually avoided human contact entirely. What happened, Marcus? Mrs. Patterson asked, her voice carrying the eager tone of someone who lived for neighborhood drama. Just a construction accident, Marcus replied. Karen was dumping yard waste on my property when some unstable ground gave way. Fortunately, she wasn't seriously injured. Mr. Jacoby peered into the pit with professional interest. Hell of a hole. What were you building? A walkway. The concrete contractor assured me the ground was stable, but Karen Hutchins was released from county lockup at 4:17 p.m. with a court date, 3 citations, and a rage that had been fermenting for 9 hours in a concrete cell that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. The desk sergeant had returned her personal effects, wallet, keys, and a cell phone with 17 missed calls from her sister along with a pamphlet about anger management classes that she immediately threw in the trash. The Uber driver who picked her up took one look at her mud-stained clothes and defeated expression, and mercifully didn't attempt conversation during the 20-minute ride home. Karen spent the journey staring out the window, mentally cataloging every slight, every humiliation, every perfectly calculated move that Marcus Rivera had used to destroy her morning. The bastard had planned everything. The timing, the location, even the specific failure point of his little concrete trap. She'd been outmaneuvered by someone she'd dismissed as a suburban perfectionist with no backbone, and the knowledge burned worse than the scrapes on her arms. From climbing out of his engineered hole, when the Uber pulled into her driveway, Karen's anger crystallized into something harder and more focused. Marcus wanted to play games. Fine, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed she was just another disorganized neighbor causing random trouble. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. Karen Hutchins had spent 55 years as a property manager for low-income housing developments in 3 different states. She'd dealt with slumlords, drug dealers, and tenants who thought property destruction was a competitive sport. She'd learned to fight dirty because clean fighting meant losing, and losing meant families got evicted into homeless shelters. Marcus might be an engineer, but Karen was a survivor. Her house looked worse than usual after being away for most of the day. The lawnmower she'd abandoned mid-task was still sitting in the middle of her front yard, and the garden hose snaked across her driveway like a green python. But it was the white envelope tucked into her front door that made her blood pressure spike. Notice of code violation, City of Riverside, Building and Safety Department. Karen ripped open the envelope with shaking hands, already knowing what she'd find inside. Her shed, the one she'd built herself last spring to house her lawn equipment, was apparently in violation of setback requirements, permit regulations, and utility easement restrictions. She had 30 days to bring the structure into compliance, or face daily fines of $150. Son of a bitch, she whispered, crumpling the notice. This wasn't coincidence. Marcus had somehow triggered this inspection, probably when he called in her accident this morning. She unlocked her front door and stepped into a house that felt different somehow, as if 9 hours in jail had shifted her perspective on everything she thought she knew about her life. The living room was cluttered with magazines and unpaid bills. The kitchen sink was full of dishes she'd been meaning to wash. Even her beloved garden gnomes, visible through the back window, looked shabby and pathetic. For a moment, Karen felt the crushing weight of everything that was wrong with her life. 58 years old, divorced, living alone in a house she couldn't afford to maintain, fighting petty wars with neighbors who probably earned in a month what she made in a year. When had she become this person? Then she remembered Marcus' face when he'd leaned down to the police car window. The cold satisfaction in his eyes, the calculated cruelty of his words. He hadn't just trapped her in a hole, he'd enjoyed it, and that enjoyment had revealed something important. Marcus Rivera wasn't the reasonable, law-abiding citizen he pretended to be. He was as ruthless as she was, just better at hiding it, which meant she could fight him on his own level. Karen went to her computer and opened her browser, typing Marcus Rivera Engineer Riverside into the search bar. If he wanted to play the research game, she could play it too. The results were enlightening. Marcus worked for Henderson Engineering, a firm that specialized in municipal projects, bridges, water treatment facilities, and public works contracts that were funded by taxpayer money. He'd been with the company for 15 years, working his way up from junior engineer to project manager on some significant infrastructure developments. More importantly, he was licensed by the state, which meant his professional reputation was tied to his personal conduct. Engineers who got involved in criminal activities or ethical violations could lose their licenses, their jobs, and their entire careers. Karen smiled for the first time since falling into his trap. Marcus had made another mistake. He'd revealed that he was willing to bend rules and manipulate systems to get what he wanted. All she had to do was document it. She spent the next hour researching everything she could find about Marcus Rivera, his job, and his family. Alina Rivera was a licensed family therapist with her own practice. Their daughter Sophia was a junior at Riverside High School, apparently on the honor roll and the varsity soccer team. The family owned their house outright, drove sensible cars, and had the kind of stable, comfortable life that Karen had never quite managed to achieve. But stability meant vulnerability. People with something to lose were easier to hurt than people who had nothing left. At 6:30 p.m., Karen's phone rang. Her sister Linda, calling for the fourth time that day. Jesus Christ, Karen, where have you been? I've been worried sick. I had a legal issue this morning. It's handled? What kind of legal issue? The kind where you need bail money? Karen closed her eyes. Linda was the successful one in the family, married to a doctor, living in a gated community in Arizona, always ready, with advice and judgment in equal measure. I said, it's handled, Linda. This is about that neighbor thing, isn't it? The one you've been complaining about for months. Linda's voice took on the lecturing tone that had irritated Karen since childhood. I told you to just ignore him. Now, what, you got arrested? It was a misunderstanding, Karen. Linda's voice softened slightly. You can't keep doing this. Every place you've lived, every job you've had, there's always some conflict, some drama. Maybe it's time to consider that the common factor in all these situations is you. Karen felt something snap inside her chest. Are you seriously giving me a therapy session right now? I'm trying to help you. You're 58 years old and you're getting arrested for neighborhood disputes? This isn't normal behavior. Normal. Karen laughed bitterly. You want to know what's not normal? Having your neighbor build booby traps in his backyard because you hurt his precious flowers. Having the police treat you like a criminal because some uptight engineer decided to play vigilante. Linda was quiet for a moment. What do you mean, booby traps? Karen explained the morning's events, watching her anger rebuild as she recounted each humiliating detail. By the time she finished, Linda was making the concerned clucking sounds that meant she was about to offer unwanted advice. Karen, that doesn't sound like a booby trap. It sounds like you fell through unstable ground while you were trespassing on his property. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of you not going to prison. Do you understand what could happen if you keep escalating this? You could lose your job, your house, everything. Karen looked around her cluttered living room, at the bills stacked on her coffee table, and the water stain on her ceiling that she couldn't afford to fix. What exactly would I be losing, Linda? What amazing life am I supposed to be protecting? Here you're scaring me. Good, maybe you should be scared. Maybe you should worry about what happens when someone pushes a person too far. Karen hung up before Linda could respond, then immediately turned off her phone. She didn't need a lecture about proportional responses and legal consequences. She needed to plan her next move. At 8 p.m., Karen put on dark clothes and walked through her neighborhood, studying it with new eyes. Maple Street was a collection of modest homes built in the 1990s, occupied mostly by middle-class families who kept their lawns mowed and their drama private, the kind of place where people minded their own business and assumed their neighbors would do the same, which made it the perfect place for someone like Marcus to hide his true nature. Karen positioned herself across the street from the Rivera house, partially hidden behind Mrs. Patterson's hedge, and activated the video camera on her phone. If Marcus was willing to use surveillance against her, she could return the favor. The house looked peaceful from the outside. Warm light in the windows, a car in the driveway, the kind of domestic tranquility that made Karen's chest ache was something she didn't want to examine too closely. Through the large front window, she could see Marcus and Alina sitting on their couch, apparently watching television, but it was the second-floor window that caught her attention. Sophia's room, where the teenage girl was visible at her desk, probably doing homework. The curtains were open, and Karen could see everything, the posters on the walls, the books scattered across the desk, even the laptop computer where Sophia was apparently video chatting with friends. Marcus Rivera woke up at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of his phone buzzing with notifications. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 67 emails, all received in the past 6 hours while he'd been sleeping peacefully next to his wife. The first message was from his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Marcus, Someone is spreading terrible rumors about you online. Call me. The second was from his boss at Henderson Engineering. Need to speak with you immediately about some concerning allegations. My office, 7 a.m. The third was from Elena's sister in Portland. What the hell is going on? Why are there posts about Marcus being a predator? Marcus sat up in bed, his engineering mind immediately shifting into crisis management mode. He scrolled through the messages, quickly identifying the pattern. Someone had posted accusations about him on social media, and the story was spreading through interconnected networks of parents, neighbors, and professional contacts. He found the original post on the Riverside Parents Facebook group and read it twice, his blood pressure rising with each word. The message was a masterpiece of calculated destruction, technically accurate facts, twisted into implications that painted him as a dangerous predator who used surveillance equipment to spy on children and built traps to injure innocent neighbors. Alina, he shook his wife gently. Wake up. We have a problem. Alina read the post over his shoulder, her expression shifting from confusion to anger to professional assessment. As a therapist who'd dealt with false allegations before, she understood immediately how dangerous this could become. This is Karen, she said quietly. She's escalating. She's not just escalating, she's gone nuclear. Marcus scrolled through the comments under the post, watching in real time as his reputation disintegrated. Parents he'd known for years were expressing concern about his surveillance cameras. Neighbors were sharing stories about his obsessive behavior regarding his lawn and garden. Someone had even posted his home address with a warning to keep your kids away from this house. Sophia appeared in their bedroom doorway, her phone in her hand and tears in her eyes. Dad, kids at school are texting me about some post online. They're saying you're a pervert. Marcus felt something break inside his chest. This was exactly what he'd tried to avoid, his family becoming collateral damage in a conflict that should have stayed between him and Karen. But she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now his 16-year-old daughter was paying the price for his strategic miscalculation. Come here, sweetheart. Alina pulled Sophia into a hug. Someone posted lies about your father online. We're going to fix this. But why would someone do that? Sophia's voice was small and confused. Dad helps people. He builds things that keep people safe. Marcus looked at his daughter's face and felt his anger crystallize into something harder and more focused than anything he'd ever experienced. Karen had made this personal when she destroyed his garden. She'd made it war when she trespassed on his property, but attacking his family, terrorizing his child had moved this into territory where engineering solutions wouldn't be sufficient. I have to go to work early today, he told Alina. Damage control. Can you handle the school situation? I'll call Sophia's counselor and the principal. Make sure they understand what's happening. Alina's voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd navigated crisis situations professionally. What are you going to do about Karen? Marcus looked at his phone, where new comments were appearing under the post every few minutes. The story was gaining momentum, spreading beyond their immediate neighborhood into broader community groups. By noon, hundreds of people would have read Karen's accusations. By evening, it would be thousands. I'm going to remind her that engineers don't just build foundations, he said quietly. We also know how to demolish them. Henderson Engineering occupied a modern glass building overlooking the Riverside Municipal Complex, a location that reinforced the company's relationship with city government and public works projects. Marcus arrived at 6:45 a.m. to find his boss, David Henderson, already waiting in the conference room with two other senior partners. Sit down, Marcus. Henderson's expression was grim. We need to discuss your current situation. Marcus had worked for Henderson for 15 years, helping build the company's reputation for technical excellence and ethical business practices. He'd managed millions of dollars in municipal contracts, supervised dozens of junior engineers, and never had so much as a billing dispute with a client. I assume you've seen the social media posts, Henderson continued. Allegations about surveillance equipment and intentional property damage designed to injure neighbors. The allegations are false, Marcus replied calmly. This is a harassment campaign by a neighbor who's angry about being arrested for trespassing and illegal dumping. Explain the surveillance cameras, standard home security system, properly installed and positioned to monitor my own property. All equipment was purchased legally and installed according to manufacturer specifications. And the structural failure that trapped this woman. Marcus had prepared for this question. A concrete walkway that collapsed under dynamic loading conditions. The city inspector has already verified that all permits were properly obtained and the construction was performed to code. Henderson's partner, Margaret Chen, leaned forward. Marcus, the problem isn't whether these allegations are true. The problem is that they exist at all. We have municipal contracts worth $12 million, and half of our clients are government agencies that cannot afford to be associated with scandal. I understand the business implications, Marcus said. What do you need from me? Complete transparency, Henderson replied. Access to all documentation related to this situation, permits, inspection reports, police reports, everything. And I want you to consider taking a temporary leave of absence until this is resolved. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him. The same sensation he'd experienced when designing structures and earthquake zones. The foundation of his professional life was being stressed beyond its design limits, and he needed to respond quickly before everything collapsed. "I'll provide all documentation within 24 hours, he said, "but I won't take a leave of absence. That would be interpreted as an admission of guilt, and it would give my accuser exactly what she wants, the destruction of my career and reputation." "Then what's your plan?" Margaret asked. Marcus stood up, straightening his tie with the precise movements of someone preparing for battle. "I'm going to treat this like any other engineering problem. Identify the failure points, calculate the required forces, and implement a solution that permanently addresses the structural deficiencies." At 8:30 a.m., Marcus sat in his car outside Riverside Elementary School, waiting for the morning drop-off period to begin. He'd spent an hour researching Karen Hutchins' background, and what he'd discovered had shifted his understanding of the entire conflict. Karen wasn't just an angry neighbor. She was a woman whose life had been a series of escalating conflicts with authority figures, property owners, and anyone who represented the kind of stability she'd never achieved. She'd been fired from 3 property management jobs for inappropriate confrontational behavior with tenants. She'd been evicted twice for lease violations. She'd filed 17 complaints with various city agencies over the past 5 years, most of them dismissed as frivolous. More importantly, she had a pattern of using false allegations as weapons when conventional approaches failed. In Phoenix, she'd accused a landlord of sexual harassment after he'd initiated eviction proceedings. In Sacramento, she'd filed complaints about a neighbor's suspicious behavior around children after losing a property line dispute. The accusations against Marcus weren't random escalation, they were a practiced technique. But Karen had made a crucial error in her research. She'd assumed that Marcus was just another suburban professional who would crumble under public pressure. She hadn't understood that civil engineers were trained to anticipate failure modes and design redundant safety systems. Marcus had been building those systems from the moment he'd decided to fight back. At 8:45, Karen emerged from her house to retrieve her morning newspaper. Marcus activated his phone's video recording and called her number. "What do you want?" Karen's voice was hostile but wary. "I want to discuss your social media posts," Marcus said calmly. "I have nothing to discuss with you." "I think you do, because in approximately 30 minutes, you're going to receive a visit from Detective Sarah Morrison of the Riverside Police Department's Cybercrimes Unit. She's going to ask you about your use of false identity accounts to spread defamatory content across multiple social media platforms." Marcus watched Karen freeze on her front lawn, the newspaper clutched in her hands. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "You created 3 anonymous accounts yesterday evening to amplify your original post. Unfortunately, you used the same IP address for all of them, and you made identical grammatical errors in each version." Detective Morrison specializes in tracking online harassment campaigns, and she found the pattern quite obvious. This was only partially true. Marcus had identified the anonymous accounts himself and documented the evidence, but he hadn't yet contacted the police. He was giving Karen a chance to understand the scope of